The smoke reached her before the sirens did. Joan Whitaker stood barefoot in the cold, her house collapsing behind her, the ring she grabbed pulsing in her fist. When her son didn't pick up, and her daughter offered nothing but excuses, she didn't argue. She documented everything. By the time the ashes cooled, she had changed her number, her locks, and her legal next of kin. They left her in the fire. She left them off the paperwork. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The smoke reached her before the sirens did. Acrid and black, it poured into her bedroom like a thief. Joan Whitaker stood barefoot on the porch, heart pounding, lungs burning, wrapped in nothing but her thin cotton nightgown, and the heat of her own disbelief. Behind her, the home she'd loved for 40 years hissed and crackled like it was alive and dying. The air reeked of scorched wood, plastic, insulation. The walls groaned before surrendering to the fire, windows shattering with the sound of bones breaking. Her chest rose and fell in tight, shallow breaths, her fingers white-knuckled around the only thing she'd managed to grab, the gold wedding band that once lived on her husband's hand. She didn't remember picking it up, only that it had been on the nightstand, and now it pulsed against her palm like a second heartbeat. Red lights painted the front yard in strobing flashes as the fire engine finally roared into view. Tires screeched. Doors flew open. Shouts rang out. "Ma'am, are you alone? Anyone else inside?" Joan nodded numbly. "Just me." Her voice came out a dry rasp, like leaves dragged across pavement. She didn't cry. Her tears had dried up years ago, sometime between her husband's last breath and the moment her children started treating her like a leftover chore. She watched them work, hoses unspooling like veins across the lawn, boots slapping wet concrete, axes hacking through walls that once held her family's laughter. There was no one to call out for, no one inside to save. A young firefighter approached her, soot already streaking his brow. "Looks like it started from the wiring, ma'am. Maybe the old junction box in the attic." Joan blinked at him, stunned by the sheer normalcy of the explanation. Faulty wiring, like her house had simply expired. She gave a small nod, more to herself than him, and stepped aside as they hauled equipment past her. She didn't ask how much would be salvageable. She already knew the answer. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers, the screen sticky with ash. First, she dialed Michael. It rang 4 times before his voicemail kicked in. "Hi, it's Michael. Can't talk right now. Leave a message." She didn't. Next, she tapped Tamara's name. It rang twice, then clicked live. "Mom? It's kinda late. What's going on?" Tamara's voice was all surface concern, sugar over sawdust. "There's been a fire," Joan said quietly. "The house is gone." A pause. Not gasped horror. Not a rush of questions. Just silence. Then a sigh. "Oh, Mom, that's terrible. But it's just really crowded right now. I mean, with the boys home and Greg's mom visiting, there's barely space to move." Joan let the words settle. Like soot. Like snow. She held the phone closer to her ear, as if maybe distance was distorting meaning. "I understand," she said evenly. "It's late. I should go. Let me know what you figure out, okay?" Tamara added, a little too brightly, "Maybe we can coordinate something later." Joan hung up without answering. Across the street, the neighbor's porch light flicked on. A tall figure emerged, broad-shouldered, limping slightly from an old back injury she remembered hearing about during block parties years ago. Harlan Reed didn't speak as he approached. He just draped a thick canvas coat over her shoulders and stood beside her, his gaze steady on the blaze. "They said faulty wiring," she murmured. "House that old," Harlan replied. It was a matter of time. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full of memories and things unspoken. She remembered when his wife died 10 years back, and how she'd sent over chicken pot pie without a note, because grief didn't need conversation. Now he stood with her the same way. Unmoving, solid, human ballast. The roof collapsed inward with a roar, sparks leaping into the night sky like fireflies drunk on gasoline. Joan didn't flinch. The fire had already taken what it came for. Her hand slipped into her coat pocket. The phone was still there, vibrating faintly from some auto-generated emergency alert. She unlocked the screen, her thumb hovering over her contacts list. Michael, Tamara. She stared at their names like they were strangers she'd been warned about. Not enemies, just irrelevant. Like numbers for stores that had closed. Then, without a word, she swiped left. Delete favorite. Delete favorite. Gone. The fire raged on, but Joan was done watching. The motel room smelled like bleach and old gum wrappers. The air conditioner rattled like loose teeth, spitting out a breeze that never quite reached the bed. Joan placed her emergency credit card on the counter with a shaking hand, careful not to meet the night clerk's eyes. Behind the glass, he looked half asleep, more interested in the static blurred television than the woman with soot in her hair and a too-thin coat clutched tight around her. Single, non-smoking. First floor, he mumbled, sliding a keycard across. Ice machines broken. Vendings down the hall. Joan nodded and took the key. No questions, no concern. That was fine. She wasn't in the mood for pity dressed up as customer service. Room 107 had a rust-brown carpet, a beige bedspread that smelled faintly of cigarettes, and a buzzing light fixture that flickered like it was mourning something. She set her coat on the desk chair and sat at the edge of the bed. The mattress dipping under her weight like it, too, had given up. Her palms were raw from holding the ring too tightly. She loosened her fingers and placed it gently on the nightstand, then pulled the plastic-wrapped remote from its holster and turned the TV on, if only to fill the silence. The local news was still replaying footage from the fire. There it was, her home now just a skeleton outlined in flame, the roof folded in like a collapsed lung. She watched the screen without blinking until the weather came on. Then her phone vibrated. Michael, let us know if you need anything long-term. No punctuation, no question mark, not even her name. She stared at the text, then at the ceiling. She pictured his granite-countered kitchen, his espresso machine, the wine fridge. She thought of his 3-car garage, his business-class flights, his smug voice at every family function saying, "We're just swamped, Mom, but let us know what you need." And now here he was, offering long-term, the same way someone offers a rain check for dinner they never intended to keep. The phone buzzed again. Venmo. Tamara Whitaker requests $40 label. Thanksgiving groceries. Joan let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, and wasn't quite a sob. She pressed her thumb to her temple, fighting back the ache that had settled behind her eyes. Tamara hadn't even texted to check on her. Not a call, not a word, but she had time to swipe through Venmo and request gas money for sweet potatoes and whipped cream. Joan declined it. She turned the TV off and sat in the silence. From the hallway came the distant hum of the vending machine, and the soft clang of someone dropping coins in. The light under her door flickered as someone passed. It was 2 days before Thanksgiving. She used to host. She remembered the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon rolls, the way the dining table, her mother's old oak table, used to groan under the weight of all the dishes. She remembered Elena climbing into her lap with powdered sugar on her nose, whispering, "Best mashed potatoes ever, Grandma." Now she was here, room 107. A bed that creaked and a plastic cup half full of tap water. Her phone buzzed again. "Elena, Grandma, are you okay?" "I didn't know." Joan exhaled slowly. The lump in her throat wasn't sadness, it was recognition. Elena had always had more heart than the rest of them combined. She typed back, fingers steadier this time. "Joan, I will be." She set the phone down and stood slowly, pulling the curtains open just enough to see the parking lot. A street lamp cast pale yellow over rows of dented sedans and one rusted-out pickup. The night air pressed against the glass like a cold palm. She didn't cry. She hadn't the night it burned, and she wouldn't now. But something did change, something final, quiet, and irreversible. Joan sat back down, wrapped the thin blanket tighter around her, and turned off the light. Moments later, her phone lit up once more. A name she hadn't seen in years. Simone Palmer. "I heard. If you're ready, I'm here." Joan stared at the message. Then slowly, she smiled. The air inside the storage facility was colder than she expected. Industrial, sterile, humming with the low drone of fluorescent lights overhead. Joan tightened her scarf and stepped through the automated glass doors, her boots clicking on the polished cement. The scent of cardboard, metal dust, and faint mildew wrapped around her like a familiar ghost. Unit 114B. She didn't need to check the slip in her coat pocket. She knew the number by heart. She'd been paying for it since the month after Harold died. 27 years of marriage packed into a concrete cube the size of a small bedroom. No one had ever asked her why she kept it, and no one had ever offered to help clear it. She slid the key into the metal latch, fingers stiff with cold, and pulled the door open. It groaned in protest, revealing rows of mismatched boxes, an old rocking chair under a tarp, a suitcase with her maiden name still on the tag. The air inside smelled like newspaper ink, aged wood and time. She stepped inside, the door thudding shut behind her with a finality that echoed. The first box she opened was labeled in Michael's handwriting, College Awards plus MISC. She rifled through dusty plaques and certificates he'd never come back for. Dean's List, Beta Gamma Sigma. Some framed photo of him in a suit shaking hands with someone and a name tag. His accomplishments, boxed up and abandoned. Next was Tamara's wedding china plus cards written in fading pink Sharpie. Joan peeled back the brittle tape. Stacks of unused thank you notes, a chipped serving platter, one wine glass missing its stem. None of it had seen daylight in over a decade. Tamara had once said she'd come for it when the boys were older. They were in high school now. Joan's lips pressed into a line. She moved methodically, box by box, sorting without sentiment. If it wasn't hers, it went into the growing donate pile by the door. If it held meaning once, it didn't now. She reached the back wall, where the oldest items were stacked. Her knees creaked as she crouched and pulled out a fireproof document folder. The kind Harold had insisted on buying after their neighbor's garage caught fire in '93. She hadn't opened it in years. Her hands trembled as she unzipped it. Inside were crisp insurance documents, yellowed but intact, policies she'd forgotten existed, and tucked beneath them, folded neatly, were papers from Harold's pension, the one she thought had ended with his death. But there it was, an addendum marked spousal survivor distribution, unsigned. She sank onto an overturned crate, papers in her lap, the weight of untapped years pressing down on her like a second gravity. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Simone Palmer, sending some listings. No pressure, just in case. Joan looked up from the folder, scanning the small unit. This wasn't a shrine. It wasn't sacred. It was just a graveyard of good intentions, and she was done being the caretaker. She stood, took one long breath, and began moving the donation boxes outside the unit. With each load, the space grew emptier and lighter. That evening, she met Simone downtown. The building stood tall against the Denver skyline, its glass catching the last streaks of golden hour. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. No hallways, no neighbors passing by. Joan stepped out slowly, almost reverently. The room was flooded with sunlight. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the hardwood floors in honeyed warmth. The city sprawled beneath her, distant and hushed. She could see the curve of the mountains beyond, ghost-like in the haze. "Take your time," Simone said softly, staying back near the door. Joan ran her fingers along the kitchen counter. Marble, cool and smooth. She touched the window glass. It pulsed with the heat of sun on glass. She imagined morning tea here. Silence, no footsteps overhead. No television through the walls, just light and air. A single chair in the corner caught her eye, just staging furniture, but something about it stopped her. She walked to it, sat down and looked out. No past, no smoke, just sky. She exhaled slowly, letting the air leave her bones. Then she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "Yes, this one." Joan slid the final page across the polished conference table, her signature scrawled in steady ink, the kind of stroke that knew exactly what it was doing. The leasing agent blinked, double-checking the line that read, "All cash, verified, no financing, no co-signers, no questions. Everything's in order," he said, tone a little too reverent now. "We don't usually see transactions move this fast." "I don't usually burn my life down in a week," Joan replied, folding her hands in her lap, her voice calm and crisp. He laughed, uncertain whether he was allowed to, and stood to shake her hand. She didn't stand. She was done rising for people who didn't rise for her. Outside, Simone leaned against the sleek glass wall, holding 2 paper cups of coffee, and wearing her signature matte lipstick that never smeared, no matter the weather or truth being spoken. "Well?" she asked. Joan took one of the cups, and gave a single nod. "It's mine." They didn't hug. There wasn't a need. Some victories feel too sacred to narrate aloud. The next morning, Joan walked into a strip mall phone store, and changed her number. The teenager behind the counter was startled when she declined to transfer her contacts. "Fresh start?" he asked, spinning a fidget cube behind the register. Joan gave him a wry smile. Fresh enough. She drove next to a UPS store, nestled between a dry cleaner and a nail salon, signed up for a private mailbox, and let the key settle into her palm. Metal. Solid. Anonymous. She tucked it into her coat pocket like a secret too delicious to share. The calls started later that afternoon. "Michael, hey, I heard through Tamara that you're in some kind of apartment or temporary setup. We could probably convert the garage if you're desperate. It's insulated. Mostly." Joan looked at the voicemail transcript without emotion. The word desperate sat on the screen like a fly in a glass of water, casual cruelty pretending to be charity. She deleted it. 10 minutes later, a text buzzed from Tamara. "Have you considered a shared retirement community? The one Greg's dad looked at had nice walking trails. We could schedule a tour?" Joan took a slow sip of tea. Her view now wasn't a neighborhood street full of cracked driveways and nosy mailboxes. It was skyline, Denver stretching out beneath her like an open hand. Steel, glass, altitude, no expectations. She replied once. "Joan, thank you. I've made other arrangements." That was all. Later that evening, Simone arrived holding a sleek wooden box of red wine and a key fob dangling from a satin ribbon. "Your castle," she said, placing both on the kitchen counter. "And your moat." Joan picked up the key, turned it in her hand. It was surprisingly light. "Do most people cry when they move in?" Simone grinned. "The smart ones do it quietly." They shared a glass of the wine while sunlight dimmed into city glow. Joan didn't talk much. Didn't have to. The walls were new. The air smelled of pine and stone and faint lemon oil. No one had ever lived here before. It didn't feel like a second chance. It felt like the first one. After Simone left, Joan moved through each room with deliberate pace. She didn't rush to unpack. She wanted to feel the corners, the echo of her steps, the strength of a space that asked nothing of her. She opened her laptop at the kitchen island, the glow from the screen washing over her face like moonlight. She logged into her healthcare portal. Emergency contacts. Edit 2 names glowed back at her. Michael Whitaker. She stared at them. It wasn't anger. It wasn't grief. It was precision. The slow realization that if she collapsed in this penthouse tomorrow, she didn't want the people who offered garages and brochures making decisions over her unconscious body. Remove contact. Confirm. Yes. Remove contact. Confirm. Yes. She leaned back, breathing in the clean eucalyptus air wafting from the new diffuser. Outside, the skyline pulsed gently. No footsteps, no judgments, just the sound of freedom, clicking softly beneath her fingertips. The notary's pen scratched across the paper like a match being struck. Joan didn't flinch. In a quiet office 8 floors above the city, she watched the final line of ink bloom beneath her name, legally binding and utterly irreversible. The lawyer, a woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and the patience of 1,000 stories just like this one, set the will aside, with a gentle tap. "It's official," she said. "You've excluded your children. Do you want to leave a letter explaining why?" "No," Joan replied, folding her hands in her lap. "They'll understand. Or they won't. Either way, it's not my burden anymore. The room smelled faintly of leather binders and the citrus oil used on the wood floor. Through the window, the city gleamed under the late afternoon sun, cars threading between buildings like quiet veins. The lawyer nodded. And the conditions for your granddaughter? Consistent voluntary contact. Nothing owed. But if she disappears, so does her place. Understood. By the time Joan stepped back into the elevator, she felt taller. Not vindicated, just aligned. Like the scaffolding she'd been leaning on for decades had been removed, and she hadn't collapsed. Later that afternoon, she visited the bank. The forms were straightforward. Primary beneficiary, removed, new beneficiary, Crescent Literacy Foundation. It was a small nonprofit she'd quietly supported since her nursing days. They put books in kids' hands without pomp, without asking for likes or lawn signs. Harold had volunteered for them once, reading aloud to second graders even when the chemo made his voice thin. She remembered how the children leaned in, listening like it was gospel. She signed the change and slid the folder back across the counter. That night, she rearranged her life in quieter ways. She bought herself new bedding, high thread count, cloud white. The kind she used to look at longingly but never felt she deserved. The old dishes went in the donation box. In their place, a navy and cream stoneware set, simple, smooth, hers. And the balcony chair, wrought iron with a navy cushion, angled just enough for mountain views, was placed in the exact corner where the sun lingered longest. She made chamomile tea, the bag steeping in a ceramic mug that warmed both hands. No voices, no competing televisions, just the soft whoosh of distant traffic and the breath of wind off the high-rise walls. Joan curled her feet beneath her and sipped slowly, watching the city stretch itself into evening. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was waiting for anything. The next morning, she stopped by Harlan's. He was watering the strip of succulents on his balcony when she called out. "Got a favor," she said. "Didn't think you came with those," he grunted, though his eyes softened. She handed him a sealed envelope. "I put your name on my medical records. Emergency contact. And a few other things." He didn't open it. "Didn't need to. You trust me that much." "I trust you not to speak for me," she said. "That's the difference." He nodded once. No more. That night, while refilling her prescriptions online, she checked the contacts tab again. Just one name now. Harlan Reed. No Michael. No Michael. No more ghosts of obligation. The message came at 10:42 p.m. Her phone buzzed against the windowsill, breaking the stillness. "Michael, why did your doctor's office say we're not listed?" Joan stared at the screen, her thumb hovering. Outside, the skyline blinked softly, buildings alive with other people's stories. She didn't reply. She just set the phone down, tea in hand, and leaned back in her chair, peaceful, unreadable, untouchable. The first Christmas carol caught Joan off guard. She was walking back from the market with a canvas tote of potatoes and rosemary when the speakers strung across a lamppost crackled to life. "Have yourself a merry little Christmas." Soft saccharine, laced with irony. She stopped beneath the blinking snowflake lights and stared at the passing couples, the clatter of boots and shopping bags echoing against brick walls. In another life, she might have had a list of guests to prepare for. Mashed sweet potatoes cooling on the counter, a set of wine glasses drying next to the sink, someone calling from the next room, asking where she kept the good napkin. This year, no one asked where she'd be. The penthouse was quiet when she returned, the kind of silence that doesn't ache, it simply breathes. She set the tote on the marble island and pulled out her rosemary, the scent instantly warming the space. Later, while peeling carrots, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the notification and froze. Tamara Whitaker posted a new photo. Joan tapped it without thinking. The image was a cheerful blur of reds and greens, string lights, children's pajamas, a fire crackling in the background. Tamara stood smiling between her sons. Michael stood to one side, raising a glass of red wine. Elena was there too, her expression a little more subdued. And behind them all, almost invisible, was Joan's old living room chair. Same tufted fabric, same worn armrest, rehomed. The caption read, "All 4 generations under one roof are a one lun fash. Grateful hash family first." Joan didn't blink, didn't flinch, but something behind her ribs hardened. Not pain, not betrayal, something quieter. She set the phone down gently, washed her hands, and turned the oven on to 300. The pot roast seared beautifully, garlic, onion, rosemary melding into something tender and deep. She basted it with red wine she'd bought for herself. Not to share. Not for show. As it cooked, she lit 3 candles on the windowsill. Small, white, unscented, the kind you forget are burning until the wax pools. When the roast was done, she plated it with care, just enough for one, with roasted carrots and fingerling potatoes. She carried the tray to the balcony and sat in her iron chair, wrapping herself in a fleece blanket patterned with fir trees. Below, the city twinkled. Distant laughter rose from somewhere 10 floors down, a party spilling onto a terrace. But up here it was clean. Untouched, she set her phone next to the tray and started It's a Wonderful Life on low volume. The old black and white glow danced across the glass as George Bailey ran through the snow, shouting about second chances. Halfway through the film, her phone lit up again. "Elena, I'm so sorry, Grandma. I didn't know they were posting that. I didn't even know we were going to Tamara's until the day before." Joan read the message slowly, watching the words land. She typed, "You didn't do anything wrong. No judgment, no guilt, just truth." Elena replied with a heart. Then nothing else. Joan let the movie finish. She sipped warm cider from a ceramic mug, fingers tracing the smooth glaze. The balcony lights she'd hung the day before blinked gently around her. White only, no flashing colors. Simple, steady. She cleaned up her dishes, folded the blanket, and blew out the candles one by one. Just as she was locking up for the night, the doorbell chimed. She opened it to find Simone standing in a wool coat, cheeks pink from the cold, a manila envelope in her hand. "Didn't want to leave this with the front desk," Simone said, offering the envelope. "Merry Christmas, Joan." "What is it?" Joan asked, stepping aside so she could enter. Simone handed it over. "Final copy. Your unit deed officially transferred into your new trust." Joan took the envelope with both hands. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She knew what it meant. Ownership, permanence, control. She offered Simone tea, but the woman smiled and declined. "Next time," Simone said, eyes warm. "I just wanted to hand it to you myself." Joan watched her leave. The door shut softly behind her. She turned the envelope over once, then once more, and she smiled. The text came in at 12:03 bud, and you know bods. Da Simone. Trise pan des champagne corks popping through someone else's speakers. "Michael, Happy New Year. Hope it's a great one." That was it. No call, no follow-up, no "how are you?" Not even her name. Joan sat at her kitchen island, the only sound the slow tick of the analog clock above the pantry door. She stared at the message a moment longer, before locking the phone and sliding it across the counter like something mildly spoiled. The screen dimmed to black. She sipped her tea, Earl Grey with a splash of oat milk, and stared out at the skyline. Fireworks bloomed in the distance, distant and meaningless. When she stood, it was with intention. She opened the hallway closet and pulled down the file box marked Household Archive. The metal clasp gave way with a snap, and the scent of paper and ink drifted upward like the opening of an old novel. She sat cross-legged on the living room rug, spreading years of carbon copies and bank printouts across the floor like tarot cards. Checks with Michael's name scribbled in the memo line, fall semester tuition, paid, Tamara's wedding invoice, florals. $3,400 handwritten in Joan's looping script, down payments, co-signed loans, a dozen birthday deposits for Elena that had been cashed and never mentioned again. Joan didn't cry. She labeled. Each page she scanned was forwarded to her attorney under the subject line, "For the file." That afternoon, as she returned from the building's mailroom, Her phone buzzed with a new group message. Tamara. Hey everyone, trying to organize support for Elena's college fund. Every little bit helps, link below. The group included Michael, not Joan. Her number wasn't even on the original list. Tamara had hit forward all from another message. The link opened to a generic crowdfunding page with a photo of Elena holding her acceptance letter and a thermometer-style progress bar. The target goal blinked in red. Joan didn't respond. Not with money. Not with questions. Not with anger. She simply muted the thread. By 3 that afternoon, Harlan was knocking on her door with a cardboard tray of coffees and a framed watercolor wrapped in brown paper. It's crooked, he said as she unwrapped it. But the colors are decent. It was a mountain scene, abstract soft blues and charcoals bleeding into each other like snow meeting dusk. Joan turned it slowly in her hands. It's beautiful, she said. He helped her hang it in the foyer, above the sideboard where she kept her keys and a ceramic bowl of mints. They adjusted it 3 times, stepping back after each shift. You know, Harlan said, sipping his black coffee, you could have just bought something from a gallery. Joan smiled. I didn't want gallery perfect. I wanted really one. He nodded once, understanding tucked into the corner of his jaw. As the sun began to dip behind the skyline, casting golden light through the floor-to-ceiling glass, they stood together in easy silence. No one asked anything of the other. No one expected apologies or explanations. By evening, Joan was curled in her reading chair with her phone charging beside her. She hadn't looked at it in hours. It buzzed softly. Elena, I want to come see you. I miss you. Joan held the phone in both hands, the words illuminating her face like a candle in a dark room. She didn't reply. Not yet. She needed to sit with the weight of that message, because unlike the others, it wasn't an ask, it was a reach. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something worth answering. The knock at the door came soft but sure, 3 even taps, then silence. Joan froze at the stove, the scent of browning butter and lemon zest curling through the air. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, heart knocking quietly beneath her ribs, and opened the door. Elena stood there alone, no coat flung over her arm, no parent hovering behind her, just a navy hoodie, flushed cheeks, and wide eyes that held something uncertain, hope maybe, or the beginning of it. Joan stepped aside wordlessly. Elena walked into the penthouse, like she'd entered a cathedral. Her gaze swept upward, outward, floor-to-ceiling windows, Denver glittering beneath them, the room glowing with golden late-afternoon light. She turned slowly in place, taking it in. This is, she trailed off. Wow, Joan gave a small smile. It's quiet. It's beautiful. The girl turned, her voice softer now. Why didn't you tell me? Joan met her eyes and didn't look away. Because I wanted to see who would ask. Elena blinked, lips parting like she might speak, but then she just nodded, understanding blooming slow and heavy across her face. Are you okay here? I'm more than okay. They stood like that a moment, the stillness between them threaded with unspoken things. Christmas mornings missed, old birthday voicemails ignored, school concerts attended alone, all of it folding quietly into the space between a grandmother and the girl who still cared. I brought something, Elena said, reaching into her tote. She pulled out a yellowing index card, laminated and creased from age. You used to make these for us. Lemon bars. This was taped inside your old cabinet. Joan took the card, fingers trembling just slightly. You remembered. Only the best ones. Elena smiled. I thought maybe we could bake. The kitchen filled with the soft percussion of eggs cracking, whisks clinking, and sugar tapping into bowls. Joan showed her how to rub the zest into the sugar to release the oils, something Elena didn't know but pretended she did. They talked as they worked, voices rising with the oven's warmth. You know, Elena said, scraping batter into the pan. They said you were in a small apartment, with no kitchen, that you were struggling. Joan arched an eyebrow. Struggling with too much counter space. Elena laughed, a real one this time, sharp and clear, and wiped a smudge of flour from her cheek. They also said you were being distant. Distant, Joan repeated. Or quiet. They didn't like that I asked to come. I imagine they wouldn't. They ate the lemon bars warm, dusted with powdered sugar, standing barefoot in the kitchen like they had nowhere else to be. The tartness cut through the sugar perfectly, and Elena made a sound of approval that reminded Joan painfully of when she used to sneak raw batter from the bowl. I'm coming back, Elena said suddenly. Not just for lemon bars. I mean, I want to come back. Often. Joan turned her head slowly. You don't have to say that. I know, Elena said. That's why I mean it. They were still finishing the last crumbs when Joan's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen. Michael, do not manipulate her. Don't fill her head with guilt and lies just because you're bitter and alone. Joan's fingers hovered over the screen. She didn't sigh, didn't frown. She pressed down. Block this contact, confirm. Yes. The notification vanished like a match in the wind. She looked up at Elena, who was watching with cautious understanding. Do you want to stay for dinner? Joan asked, setting her phone face down. I make a decent pasta primavera. Elena smiled, dusting powdered sugar from her hands. I'd love to. The sun was just starting to drop behind the Rockies when Joan set the final wine glass on the balcony table. Golden light spilled across the patio tiles like honey, stretching long shadows between soft cushions and flickering candles. Her hands, steady and sure, arranged the silverware by instinct. Just 10 settings, just 10 names that mattered. She'd sent Michael a photo earlier that morning. Not a word, just the view from her balcony, the Denver skyline blushing under the coming dusk. His reply had come 2 minutes later. Michael, what exactly did you do with the insurance money? Joan didn't respond. She didn't need to. The photo had been the answer. Now the guests were arriving. Harlan came first, as always, carrying a bottle of bourbon and a tray of deviled eggs so carefully wrapped it looked like origami. You said casual, he grunted, kissing her cheek. This is me being casual. Simone followed, in a cashmere coat the color of fog, her eyes lighting up as she stepped onto the terrace. It looks like a film set, she said. I didn't think you'd actually pull it off up here. I used to organize trauma rooms in less time, Joan said dryly, pouring her a glass of sparkling rosé. Neighbors from the building came next. Real friends now, not just hallway acquaintances. One had brought homemade gougères. Another brought her father, a retired school principal who told stories with his hands. Everyone brought something, but no one brought pity. As the last hint of sun dipped behind the mountains, the air crisped, candles flared along the balcony railing, throwing soft light on weathered faces and newly forged friendships. Laughter floated freely. No one asked about her children. Joan stood, wine glass in hand, when the hum of conversation naturally slowed. I never had a retirement party, she said. I always figured nurses don't retire. We just slowly fade from the chart. A few chuckles. But I realized I didn't need a party for my career. I needed one for what came after. Harlan lifted his glass. Some people build houses, he said. Others rebuild themselves. There was a beat of silence, then a rising toast, to rebuilding. Joan drank, feeling the warmth go all the way down. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like survival. It felt like choosing. The next morning, while the scent of leftover lemon zest and pine still lingered through her living room, Joan logged into her bank's online portal. She navigated to her estate instructions with quiet precision. 50%, Crescent Literacy Foundation. 50%, Elena Whitaker. Contingent on contact, not bloodline. She saved the update and logged out. Her phone buzzed minutes later with a notification. Tamara Whitaker posted a status. Some people forget who raised them. Some people forget who sacrificed everything for them. Shame comes for us all eventually. Joan stared at the screen, expression unreadable. Another buzz followed. Elena Whitaker commented, some people don't forget how they were abandoned. Not all sacrifice is love. Joan didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply powered off the phone and turned back to her kitchen sink, running warm water over the silver tray from the night before. Later that afternoon, She sorted through her mail, mostly flyers, catalogs she hadn't subscribed to, and one white envelope, with her hospital's logo printed clean across the front. She opened it slowly. Dear Miss Whitaker, we are in the process of conducting a records audit across our patient database. Your emergency contacts list appears to be incomplete. Please confirm the accuracy of the individuals listed or submit new information via the patient portal. Dan Corbin, Administrator, Mountain View Medical Network. Joan sat down at the kitchen island, envelope still in her hand. Her pulse was steady, but her gaze lingered on the signature. Dan Corbin, she remembered him. Efficient, cordial, thorough. And now he was circling. A system was flagging her file, which meant officially Michael and Tamara no longer had access. Not even as a courtesy. A quiet smile crept to her lips. It was working. The tile was slick from morning dew, the kind of shine that tricks the eye. Joan had only stepped out to water her lavender pots. One misstep, left foot on a patch near the edge, and her ankle twisted with a sickening pop. The sky above her balcony was a clean, deep blue. Below it, Joan lay flat on the stone tiles, breath knocked from her chest, fingers curled around the watering can like it might anchor her back to solid ground. She didn't scream, didn't panic. She just breathed through the pain and reached for her phone, still inside her robe pocket. One call, paramedics were at the door in 15 minutes. The ER was quiet for a Tuesday. Too quiet, Joan thought, as they wheeled her through the pale green corridors, her ankle already swelling beneath the ice pack. The sterile scent of disinfectant and latex clung to the air. Everything smelled like something wiped clean. An older nurse took her blood pressure. Another clipped a plastic bracelet to her wrist. Then a pause. Dan Corbin appeared in the doorway, with a clipboard in one hand and reading glasses low on his nose. His expression was somewhere between polite concern and clinical confusion. Miss Whitaker, he said, stepping in, we were reviewing your file. We noticed there's no family listed in your emergency contacts. Joan tilted her head, face calm despite the ache radiating from her leg. That's not an oversight. Dan blinked. It's just unusual. I imagine it is, she said. But it's correct. He nodded slowly. We'll document that. Outside the exam room, Joan could hear the faint whir of printers and the soft tones of staff radios. A nurse passed by humming something under her breath. Somewhere down the hall, a child cried out, then stopped. Joan stared at the ceiling tiles. One of them had a faint crack running through it, like a lightning bolt frozen mid-strike. She closed her eyes. She already knew what was coming. By the time she was discharged with a boot and crutches, her phone had 5 missed calls, 3 from Michael, 2 from a number she didn't recognize. At home, propped on the couch with her foot elevated, she scrolled through the messages. Michael, just found out you were in the ER. Why wasn't I called? Michael, this is dangerous, Mom. You can't shut out your family like this. Michael, you left us no choice. I'm speaking to a lawyer. No, are you okay? No, I'm coming over. Just demands disguised as concern. She clicked forward. Subject: noise attachment. Michael's email to Jacobs and Meyer LLP from Joan Whitaker. No explanation. No narrative. Just the message. Her inbox dinged a few minutes later with a new message from her attorney. Subject: re-noise message. We're ready if they are. Joan leaned back on the couch, the soft hum of her air purifier filling the silence. The crutches leaned neatly against the wall. A bowl of lemon bars sat cooling on the kitchen counter from the batch Elena had made the day before. Her phone buzzed again. Another call from Michael. She didn't answer. She wouldn't need to. Let him call the front desk. Let him demand updates. Let him bang on locked doors with a last name no longer tied to hers. Because now, legally, structurally, and irrevocably, no one in that hospital answered to his name. The email subject line read like something dug up from a different life. Account activity alert. Joint withdrawal request. Tamara Whitaker. Joan stared at it, confused for a moment, until she remembered the dusty little account they'd opened after Tamara's second child was born. A college prep fund, Tamara had called it. A shared safety net. Joan had seeded it with a few $1,000s from a nursing bonus and promptly forgotten it existed. Until now. Joan logged into the bank's portal. Heartbeat steady. Tamara had tried to withdraw everything without notifying her, without asking. But the system flagged the transfer. Joan still had final authority. She closed the account with 2 clicks. Then deliberately, she opened a blank message, typed in Tamara's email, and attached the closure confirmation. Subject: account closed. Permanently. No explanation. No emotion. Next came the storage unit. She hadn't returned since the day she found Harold's pension paperwork, but it had been nagging at her, a loose thread she didn't want tangled into anything else. She drove there on a Tuesday, the parking lot half empty, Denver's sky moody with incoming snow. Inside the metal unit, the boxes still sat untouched. Michael, plaques, Tamara, wedding china, the things they couldn't throw away themselves, so they let her store them like a museum curator of someone else's glory days. She took one last look, then pulled out her phone. To Michael Whitaker, Tamara Whitaker subject. Final notice body, pick up your items within 72 hours, or they'll be donated. I am no longer the custodian of your past. She waited, watched for receipts. Got nothing. 3 days later, a donation truck pulled up. Joan stood beside the storage unit and handed over the final box herself. College trophies, the driver said, squinting at the label. People really give this stuff away. Joan smiled faintly. Only when they realize who left them behind. That Friday, Elena knocked on her door just before sunset. She held a spiral notebook to her chest and wore an oversized flannel over leggings. Her hair in a messy bun, eyes bright. I brought something. Joan stepped aside. Is that homework? Elena grinned. It's yours. They sat on the floor by the balcony window with mugs of jasmine tea and soft jazz playing low in the background. The notebook's first page was blank. The second said, "Tell me your stories." Joan blinked, surprised. "Anything," Elena said. "All of it. I want to know what no one else asked." So Joan talked about the year her mother died, about sneaking a cigarette behind the nurse's station in 1986 and getting caught, about meeting Harold in a parking lot during a snowstorm, about her first patient who coded, about the moment she realized her kids had started seeing her as a backup plan instead of a person. And Elena didn't interrupt once. She wrote, she nodded. She laughed where appropriate and cried when it was earned. 2 hours passed like 10 minutes. Joan reached for the teapot to refill their cups when Elena's phone buzzed on the rug. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Joan glanced down. The name on the screen was clear. Tamara. "Go ahead, Joan," said softly. Elena sighed, unlocked the phone, and opened the message. Her eyebrows twitched. "What is it?" Joan asked, already knowing. She said, "Don't let her manipulate you. She's doing this for attention." Joan leaned back against the wall, tea cooling in her hand. "You don't have to answer." But Elena was already typing. "Elena Sill, she's the only one who hasn't." She hit send without fanfare. No anger in her face, just certainty. The phone buzzed again, but she silenced it and set it aside. "I meant what I said." Elena whispered. "You're not alone." Joan reached over, placed her hand gently on top of Elena's. "No," she said. "I'm not." Joan stared at the glowing branches on her ancestry profile, each digital limb twitching with connections she no longer recognized. Names scrolled endlessly. Cousins twice removed. DNA matches from strangers with profile pictures of dogs. Photos uploaded by others claiming her childhood memories as their own. And near the top, still clinging like frost on glass, Michael Whitaker, Tamara Whitaker. She hovered the mouse over the permissions panel. The cursor blinked. Her pulse didn't. Remove shared access. Yes. Confirm relationship deletion. Joan clicked, and the branches shrank. The tree pruned itself with one cold gust. She leaned back in her chair. the hum of her laptop barely audible over the quiet jazz playing from the Bluetooth speaker in the corner. The air smelled of white tea and almond biscotti. A small ritual. Peace in progress. Next, she opened the digital storage vault she hadn't touched in years. A folder labeled Family Photos, Legacy Archive. Inside, scanned baby pictures. School plays, Tamara in her wedding gown, Michael holding his first son. She scrolled slowly, not with nostalgia, but recognition. These were moments once tended like sacred things. Now, they felt like someone else's biography. She selected everything bearing their names. Right-clicked, move to encrypted archive. Password no inheritance, 2025, a final severing of the digital cord. She shut the laptop and walked to her bedroom, where a small velvet box sat on the dresser, delivered that morning. Inside, a charm bracelet. 3 links, solid sterling silver. One etched with an engraved J, another with an H wrapped in a laurel design. The last, a tiny E, accented with a sapphire dot. Joan clasped it to her wrist. It was heavier than she expected, but only in the best way. By noon her table was set for 6. Earl Grey steeped in the china pot, her mother once brought down from a shelf just for company. Finger sandwiches waited under a linen cloth, and lemon scones cooled by the window. Her neighbors arrived one by one, each bringing something that wasn't food. An old story, a worn book, a laugh still fresh. They settled in like it was tradition, not invitation. There was June from down the hall, who'd once worked in theater lighting and told stories about accidentally blinding Broadway actors. There was Marvin, a widower who brought his late wife's cinnamon butter and refused to explain the recipe. Simone arrived last, just in time to pour the first cup. No one mentioned children. Not once, not out of caution, but because this room, this table wasn't built around them. As conversation rose and steeped with the tea, Joan lit a small white candle in the center of the table. She said nothing about it. Just let it burn. Harold would have liked this. She could picture him leaning back in the corner chair, smiling with that crooked grin, pleased not by the event, but by the precision of it. The deliberate grace in Joan's life, built by hand after everyone else had tried to write her ending. When the guests left, she cleaned slowly, washing each plate by hand, as if they needed that kind of care. The sun dipped just as she sat down on the couch, bracelet catching the amber light. A knock echoed from the front door. Joan opened it to find Elena, cheeks pink from the cold, holding a paper bag. "Forgot to bring this earlier," she said. "Your favorite tea blend." Joan stepped aside. "Come in. I'll make a cup." As they settled onto the couch, Elena glanced at the flickering candle still burning on the table. "For him?" she asked. Joan nodded once. They sat in the soft hush of the penthouse, the city lights rising behind the glass. Then quietly, Elena set down her cup. Her tone was tentative, but strong. "Can I be listed as your emergency contact?" Joan looked over, not surprised, not alarmed, just deeply, deeply still. She reached across and took her granddaughter's hand. "Yes," she said. "I was hoping you'd ask." The signature had to be precise. No hesitation, no wiggle of doubt. Joan adjusted her reading glasses and placed the pen on the thick, cream-colored page stamped with the seal of the state of Colorado. Her attorney, Linda Hayes, waited silently across the conference table, her posture as firm as the mahogany beneath their elbows. The office smelled of bergamot, ink and finality. "This," Linda said gently, tapping the folder, "makes it legally impossible for them to override your decisions. Not just difficult, impossible." Joan nodded once. Then she signed. Her name curved across the final line of the living trust, bold and even. Michael and Tamara were removed from all current and future claims, estate, medical, end-of-life decisions, everything. No more power of attorney. No more presumed inheritance. Elena was now listed as executor here. The paperwork built like armor, layered with contingencies, protections, a cascade of triggers designed to shield her from manipulation, guilt or financial dispute. Linda had drafted it like a fortress. Joan had only asked that it be unbreachable. I want it airtight, she'd told her. I don't want them getting clever later. And now it was done. The envelope she carried out of the law office that morning was thick, sealed in navy linen stock, with two summaries inside, one addressed to Michael, the other to Tamara. No letter, no emotion, just the facts. Effective immediately, you are no longer listed as a beneficiary, power of attorney, or emergency contact. No action is required from you. No assets remain in your name. This is a final decision. Joan mailed them from the post office nearest to the courthouse. She used certified delivery. No return address. Then she went home and poured herself a glass of wine. By nightfall, the internet lit up. Michael's post came first, an angry, frantic thread on Facebook, carefully worded to imply he was concerned for her well-being. When parents become paranoid and cut off family, it's heartbreaking. We tried to help. She rejected it. He tagged Tamara, posted a photo from 10 years ago. Thanksgiving, Joan at the head of the table, smiling beside a roast she'd cooked herself. The comments began flooding in, but not the way he expected. One read, "If she removed you, maybe ask yourself why." Another, "We've all seen your type. You're only loud when the money disappears." Michael didn't reply. By morning the thread was buried in silence. Tamara's call came next. The phone rang once, twice. Joan saw her name on the screen. Tamara doubly. And waited. The voicemail came in heavy, tear-laced and brittle. "I don't know why you're doing this. I'm sorry, okay? I don't know what you want. I didn't think it would go this far." Joan played the message once, then deleted it. No reply. She brewed tea with lavender honey, picked up the charm bracelet from the tray beside the sink, and slipped it back on. Her fingers moved slower these days, but not without purpose. The following morning Joan stood at her mailbox, staring at the tiny silver key. There had been flyers in the hallway lately. She knew the look, people snooping, slipping folded paper into boxes that didn't belong to them. She'd seen it happen in buildings like this before. One curious tenant, one relative trying to intercept mail. Not this time. She walked downstairs, entered the leasing office, and requested a lock change for her unit's mail slot. "Security reasons," she said flatly. "No, I don't need approval. The lease is mine." The new key arrived that evening. It slid in smoothly, turned clean, clicked shut like the final chapter of a story someone else had tried to finish without her. She turned away from the box and walked back upstairs. Light, precise steps, one hand brushing the railing like a woman who knew exactly where she stood. The sky cracked open slowly, like a peach at the height of summer, soft pinks bleeding into gold, a thin layer of cloud curling at the edge of the horizon. Joan sat still in her balcony chair, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders, the air crisp but not cruel. She could hear the early traffic below, a distant hum rising with the light. Elena sat beside her, legs tucked beneath her like a child again, a plate of lemon bars between them. "You always wake up this early?" she asked, her breath fogging faintly in the dawn chill. "Only when I want to remember I'm alive," Joan replied, her eyes trained on the eastern rim of the city. "And when the company's good." Elena reached for a lemon bar, powdered sugar falling to her lap like tiny snowflakes. They'd baked them the night before, laughing over flour disasters and oven timer debates, jazz humming through the kitchen like a third voice. Now the silence was gentle, earned. Joan turned her head slowly and studied her granddaughter's face. The girl looked older in the morning light, but more rooted somehow, like someone who had chosen who she wanted to be. "I have something for you," Joan said. She reached into the pocket of her sweater and pulled out a small brass key on a blue ribbon. Elena's eyebrows lifted. "Is this?" "It's symbolic," Joan said, placing it in her palm. "But one day it won't be." Elena held it tightly, not asking questions she already understood. They sat in silence for a while. The sun crept higher, warming their knees, turning the balcony into a soft theater for two. From inside, the scent of steeping tea drifted through the open door. "I've been thinking," Joan said, voice low, "about how much time I used to waste imagining apologies." Elena looked over. "From them?" From anyone. Everyone. I don't anymore. Joan shifted, her hands folding into her lap. There's no anger left, just edits. Elena nodded slowly, her thumb tracing the ridges of the key. You didn't close the door, she said after a moment. They just never opened it. Joan exhaled, a soft breath that left her chest lighter than before. Exactly. The balcony door opened behind them with a soft creak. Harlan stepped out carrying 2 to-go cups, steam curling into the air. Couldn't sleep. Figured caffeine's always welcome. He handed one to Elena and the other to Joan, then lowered himself into the third chair. His presence was quiet, grounding. A man who didn't need to fill silence to feel useful. They sipped in unison, the city still yawning beneath them. Joan reached for her phone, only intending to check the time, but a red notification caught her eye. She tapped it. Mountain View Health Network. Emergency contact update confirmed. Active contact. Elena Whitaker. She showed the screen to Elena. Her granddaughter looked down at it, then back up. Feels real now, she whispered. Joan nodded. Because it is. They didn't speak again, for several minutes, not because they had nothing to say, but because the view said enough. The sunrise, the skyline, the unshakable quiet of being exactly where one was meant to be. The lot was quieter than she expected. No wind, no traffic, just the sound of Joan's boots pressing into frozen dirt, the sharp crunch of pebbles under her heel, and the soft swish of winter grass brushing her coat hem. The place where her home once stood, her kitchen, her garden, her bedroom with the window that caught the afternoon sun, was now nothing but bare earth, dark and flat beneath the pale gray sky. No yellow tape, no scorched walls, only the echo of what had burned away. She walked slowly across the lot, her breath rising in puffs as she reached the center. In her gloved hand were 3 smooth stones, each one wrapped in a cloth napkin, tied with a single strand of red thread. She knelt, ignoring the cold biting through her knees, and placed the first, for memory, she whispered, setting the dark gray stone at the edge. The weight of her husband's voice, the echo of Elena's laughter as a child, the rustle of birthday wrapping paper, and the sound of her own mother singing while folding laundry. She left them here, not to forget, but to honor. The second stone was cream-colored, veined with a crack that ran diagonally across its face. For clarity, she said, setting it firmly beside the first. All the years of second-guessing, waiting on calls that never came, forgiving before apologies arrived. This was her clean page. The third was small, smooth, almost polished. For distance, she said softly, her fingers lingering over it before releasing. The kind I needed to see the truth. She stayed there a moment longer, letting the stillness settle. Then she stood, wiped her gloves, and turned away from the past, no backward glance. Back at the penthouse, the afternoon light stretched in soft gold streaks across the hardwood floor. Joan stepped into her living room, the weight of the cold lot still clinging faintly to her coat. She unwrapped a final picture frame from a linen cloth and held it in both hands. A photo, newly printed, high resolution, of her and Elena on the balcony, sunrise behind them, her hand on Elena's, just them. She hung it on the wall above the sideboard, where once there had been wedding portraits and family Christmas cards. This was the family now. No pose, no performance. Joan sat at her desk as the sky outside turned from gold to slate. She opened her medical portal one last time. There was a new field waiting. DNR form. Signed to confirm her signature was deliberate. Every loop and stroke formed with full control. Joan Whitaker. She clicked submit. A few minutes later her phone buzzed. The caller ID read Mountain View Medical. Dan Corbin. She answered on speaker. Miss Whitaker. Dan said, voice warm but careful. Just wanted to confirm. We received the updated DNR and your emergency contacts. Elena Whitaker is now the only one listed. Everything else has been removed. Perfect, Joan replied. Her tone was steady, her gaze fixed on the city beyond the glass. Dan hesitated, then added, there was some resistance on the system end. Your previous contacts flagged a dispute. But our office has marked everything final. irrevocable. I know, she said. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. She ended the call, set the phone down on the desk, and walked back to the balcony. The wind had picked up slightly. Below, headlights flickered along the street, tiny and distant. She looked out across the city that had once been background noise and now felt entirely hers. The fire hadn't ended her. It had freed her. They left me in the cold. I left them off the paperwork.